So, you want to be a time traveler? You think you got what it takes? Sure, you're a history buff with a sense of adventure. You've watched enough sci-fi movies to know not to step on any random bugs or teach a medieval peasant about iPhones and Doritos, but there's more to traveling through time than just that. For instance, you need to be prepared to avoid one of the greatest inconveniences a time traveler can face: accidentally breaking the law. A time machine won't do you much good if you wind up behind bars with no way to get back to it. Depending on the time and the place that you've traveled to, you could even wind up executed. Good luck getting back to the present after your head's been separated from the rest of your body. Luckily for you, you found this video, so whether you're a seasoned time traveler looking for an information refresh, or an aspiring traveler preparing for your first voyage, or just some random legal history enthusiast, you've come to the right place. This is your guide to the insane things that at various points in history used to be illegal. You probably think about the Roman Empire a lot, don't you? Well, even if you don't, you're definitely thinking about it now. Maybe you want that to be your next stop, to throw on a toga and see Caesar invent that famous salad. What's that? He didn't invent the salad? Then why is it called that? Never mind, not important. We're talking about laws. First and foremost, let's talk about what not to wear. If you're headed to ancient Rome, stay away from purple fabrics. Are you an emperor? No? Then it's a crime for you to wear purple in ancient Rome. Due to the expensive nature of purple dye during the days of the Roman Empire, such extravagant garb was reserved only for the wealthiest and most powerful. It doesn't matter if it's your signature color or if it really brings out your eyes. Non-royalty in ancient Rome had to skip the purple if they didn't want to wind up on the wrong side of the justice system. Female time travelers, take note: if you find yourself attending a funeral in ancient Rome, make sure you do not cry. Women crying at funerals was outlawed in ancient Rome. Why would they pass such a seemingly cruel law? Well, to combat the burgeoning funeral actor industry, of course. Ancient Roman funerals would begin with a procession of mourners walking down the street and weeping. The more people in the procession, the more beloved and popular the deceased was assumed to be. In response, a new job opportunity popped up for enterprising women: professional mourners, walking in the procession and weeping, tearing at their hair, generally making a scene over people they didn't even know. In order to crack down on that development, women were legally barred from crying at funerals to discourage people from hiring actors. Now imagine this: you're walking through the streets of ancient Rome, enjoying the breeze in your new, definitely not purple toga, when you notice a storm rolling in. Uh-oh, the air takes on a crackling electrical feel and you know lightning is about to strike. Sure enough, a flash of light blinds you for a moment as a bolt of lightning strikes a man only a few feet from you, killing him instantly. Oh no, that poor guy. Better get him a proper burial. It's only right. Wrong. Under the law of Numa Pompilius, no one struck by lightning is legally allowed to be buried. You see, this wasn't just a freak accident in the minds of ancient Romans. This was a personal screw you from Jupiter, the god of thunder himself. Defying the gods is a pretty severe no-no, and if you bury that body, it's as good as stealing a sacrifice from Jupiter. Bury the body anyway, and someone would find themselves sacrificed in its place. They could move the body out of the road if it were a trip hazard or something, but only if they didn't lift it above their knees, because that was a crime too. So now that you're better prepared for any trips to ancient Rome, let's move on to another exciting time and place: Imperial China. Most of the advice for this region and era boils down to be neat, clean, and respectful, and failure to do so might get you into some real legal trouble. During the Shang Dynasty in 1600 to 1046 BCE, littering was strictly prohibited. We're not talking about a fine or even just a little jail time. Laws during this time period stated that anyone caught throwing garbage on the road would be strictly punished by having their hand cut off. Anyone going fishing during the Tang Dynasty from 618 to 907 needed to be extra careful because the word for carp had the same pronunciation in Chinese as the last name of the Tang emperors. Extra respect was paid to the fish. According to the Miscellany of Yu Yang, a collection of records concerning legends and folk customs from the time, anyone who caught a carp while fishing was expected to release the fish right away and definitely could not eat them. Anyone caught selling carp would be flogged 60 times. So, time traveler, if you're going to go fishing in the Tang Dynasty, get very, very good at identifying fish first. Or you could just go to the Yuan Dynasty, 1206 to 1368 instead, where all fish were fair game. Don't mess with chickens though. According to the Yuan Dynasty historian Yang Yu, during the reign of Emperor Renzog, people in the capital were forbidden from holding chickens upside down. Anyone who defied this extremely specific law would be convicted of a crime and likely jailed. This is likely due to the fact that the emperor's zodiac sign was that of a rooster. To be safe, just treat all birds and fish with respect during your travels. Speaking of respecting animals, if you should find yourself traveling to ancient Egypt, there is one particular animal you need to make sure you treat with the utmost reverence: the cat. Cats were sacred in ancient Egypt, and harming one could earn you a punishment as harsh as the death penalty, which honestly, given how cute cats are, seems pretty fair. Let's just get a bit more recent and time travel over to jolly old England for a spell. It's time to get medieval. So, you want to travel to England during the Middle Ages, live out your own personal Knight's Tale. Nothing wrong with that, but there are a few things to keep in mind. Step out of your line in the wrong place at the wrong time, break the wrong obscure law, and it's off with your head. When you get to medieval England, you need to find food, of course, but be careful. Don't go hunting for game all willy-nilly. In 1198, a law was passed outlawing any hunting of deer in the royal forest. If you were caught hunting venison there, you faced quite a harsh punishment: blinding and castration. Makes you lose your appetite, doesn't it? The law was repealed in 1217, thankfully, but it's still probably best to stay away from the royal deer. Maybe it's best to avoid meat altogether and just stick to bread and ale. Just be careful if you decide to sell bread or ale in medieval England, though. In 1266, a statute was issued that fixed the prices of bread and ale in order to eliminate competition between those selling them. Bread was expected to be sold at a certain weight in correlation with the price of wheat, and a baker caught selling underweight bread would be fined and pilloried for violating the law. Oh, and speaking of food, don't think you'll be eating any grand six-course meals. From 1336 to 1856, a law proclaimed by Edward III was on the books, stating that no man, of whatever rank he be, could be served a meal with more than 2 courses. There were some exceptions for special occasions such as Christmas, which allowed for 3, but otherwise that cap was strictly set at 2. Food wasn't the only legal minefield in medieval England. Remember that whole bit about not wearing purple in ancient Rome? There were laws restricting fashion choices in medieval England as well. Many of these laws were put in place to prevent people from dressing like a higher status than they were, and others were intended to protect public decency. In 1463, a law was passed ordering that no person under the rank of lord is to wear any gown, jacket, or coat which does not cover the genitals and the buttocks. Break that rule and they'd wind up paying a 20-shilling fine. These fashion laws didn't just cover the lack of coverage that was getting popular in medieval men's fashion. For 15th century gentlemen, pikes, or shoes with long pointed ends, were all the rage. They weren't exactly big on restraint or minimalism, so sometimes these ends were long enough that they needed to be tied back around the ankles of the man wearing them. So these shoes were included in that same 1463 statute. The new shoe-based edict declared that no knight under the rank of a lord, esquire, or gentleman, nor any other person, shall wear any shoes or boots having spikes or points which exceed the length of 2 inches. Break this law and a fashion victim would be fined 3 shillings and 4 pence. These laws didn't just cover what people could wear and eat, but what they did in the privacy of their own bedrooms. Throughout the medieval era, the church held a great deal of power and exercised that power in a variety of ways. One of them was by telling married couples which days they were allowed to have sex on and which were strictly prohibited. Sex was forbidden on Thursdays and Fridays, which were set aside as preparation days for the Holy Communion, as well as on Sundays. Sex was also prohibited during Lent, during the days before Christmas, and the days surrounding the Feast of the Pentecost. So, if that's off the table, what else is there to do during leisure time around here? Maybe you could play some sports. Just choose your sports wisely because some of them were outlawed during the Middle Ages. Football, or soccer for the Americans watching, was banned for servants and laborers via a national statute in 1388. Instead of football, these men were encouraged to practice archery so they could better defend their kingdom. The punishment for playing football when enforced included 6 days in prison. The law was not officially repealed until 1845. Tennis was also off limits, at least if the would-be sportsmen were poor. In 1485, it was declared illegal for young men who were below the noble class to play tennis. Tennis was regarded as an activity for the upper classes alone, and breaking this law would result in fines. Yet another ball-related sport was limited by law when King Edward III banned bowling in 1366, again citing the need for men to practice archery instead. But forget about food, fashion, sex, and sports. There is one force in medieval England that you really don't want to mess around with: the Church. The Catholic Church outlawed blasphemy during the Middle Ages, and anyone caught speaking out of turn about God or other religious subject matter would be dealt with swiftly. Punishments for blasphemy included hanging, stoning, and being bound while one's tongue was removed with hot pliers. Let's get even more recent next. Maybe you're curious about the Tudor or Stuart periods, the early modern age of England. Many of the laws of the Middle Ages were left behind in the past, but there were still plenty of unusual laws to watch out for. As a time traveler, you should know by now that you can't just wear whatever you want, whenever you want. There are obvious tips like don't wear jeans before denim was invented, or don't wear your Taylor Swift concert merch in ancient Greece. But there's also the lesser-known don't wear silk in 1500s England. In 1509, the Act Against Wearing of Costly Apparel was passed, and by 1554, an act to avoid the excess in apparel was in effect, prohibiting the wearing of any silk garments by any person with a rank lower than that of a knight's son. Don't expect those wimpy medieval fines for breaking the law either. If caught, the punishment was 3 months in prison and a fine of £10 per day the law was broken. So there were laws about what people couldn't wear, but there were also laws about what people couldn't not wear. In 1571, the Act for the Making of Caps required all people above the age of 6 years old, except for nobles and maidens, ladies and gentlewomen, to wear an English-made wool cap on Sundays and holidays. If you were caught without a cap, you would be fined 3 shillings and 4 pence for each day the law was broken. Hear that sound? It's church bells. Here come some of those good old-fashioned religious laws again. In 1559, as England became a contentious battleground between Catholics and Protestants, Elizabeth I passed the Act of Uniformity, which required church services to use the Book of Common Prayer and made Sunday service attendance absolutely mandatory. If someone missed church, they would be fined 12 pence. Later in the 1600s, the religious landscape of England was shifting once again, and Puritans dominated much of Parliament. In 1647, in an attempt to crack down on holiday celebrations deemed pagan in nature and not pious enough, an ordinance was passed that forbade the celebration of the Christmas holiday. Additional laws were passed along those lines in the 1650s, and those caught celebrating Christmas with parties or other festivities could be fined or have their personal property seized. So if you're visiting England from 1647 to 1660, don't expect any Christmas party invites. Now let's head on over to the good old US of A and see what accidental historical crimes you might stumble into. Depending on the state, there are some really unexpected laws that are no longer on the books in the present, but that might pose an issue to someone visiting in the past. First, let's talk about drinking. Lots of people do it. But from 1920 to 1933, America was smack dab in the middle of Prohibition, which strictly prohibited the manufacture, sale, or consumption of alcohol. That's an obvious one. Most of us already know about Prohibition, but it's far from the only alcohol-related crackdown in American history. In some states, including Kentucky, it was once illegal to purchase any alcohol while the polls were open for general elections or primaries. No drinking on Election Day. This was in response to a specific issue with political parties in pre-Prohibition era America frequently bribing voters with free booze. The no alcohol on Election Days law was overturned in Kentucky in 2013. So that covers what days were forbidden for buying alcohol. But what about alcohol's temperature? Surely no one would legally mandate that. Just kidding, of course they would. That's why we brought it up in the first place. In Mississippi, it was once illegal to sell cold beer in a store. You were allowed to sell it at room temperature but not cold. This was intended to prevent drunk driving, as it forced beer drinkers to wait until they could get their freshly purchased brew somewhere with a refrigerator before cracking open a newly cold one. The law was overturned in 2013. Sure, those laws were a bit odd, but at least we're not in the Middle Ages anymore. There definitely won't be any more religiously motivated laws that restrict public life and leisure time. What's that? Yes, there absolutely were so many of those? Oh, okay. Up until as recently as the 1980s, there were quite a few laws in place preventing certain activities on Sundays. One of those was shopping or doing business of any kind. Sunday was a legally mandated day of rest, and if you had anything you wanted to pick up at the store that day, well, you were just out of luck. Thankfully, those laws have been repealed everywhere in the states except for Bergen County, New Jersey. As it turns out, not everything is legal in New Jersey. Other, more restful activities were off limits too. New York State maintained their blue laws banning work and activities on Sundays, for decades, limiting shopping and alcohol sales, but also limiting the acts of golfing or going to the circus. These laws were relaxed in 1952, but prior to that, no looking at clowns or hitting balls was permitted on the Lord's Day. Speaking of fun things to do, specifically involving balls, you know what's always a good wholesome time? Pinball. That all-American arcade classic game that no one in their right mind would ever have a problem with, let alone try to outlaw, except, of course, for the time that it was absolutely outlawed. From the time that the first coin-operated pinball machine was introduced in 1931, it was considered a form of gambling that many wrote off as immoral and dangerous to society. It was a game of chance that cost money, and that was too close to gambling for comfort in the eyes of church groups and others, including Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia of New York City. On January 21, 1942, pinball machines were banned in public spaces in New York City. The police raided candy shops, bowling alleys, bars, and any other public space that might have a pinball machine, confiscating 2,000 machines. They called the press to come and watch and smashed the pinball machines to smithereens with sledgehammers. Other cities soon joined in and banned pinball as well, including in Chicago, New Orleans, and Los Angeles. It wasn't until the 1970s when the flipper mechanism was added to the game and the attitude around pinball shifted to considering it a game of skill rather than chance. In 1974, the California Supreme Court overturned the Los Angeles ban. 2 years later, New York followed, and pinball regained its place in public spaces and the hearts of Americans everywhere. Games are one thing, but there's no way that there were any American laws on the books prohibiting expressions of joy and fun that are as ancient as humanity itself. Activities like, say, dancing. Oh, who are we kidding? We've all heard of Footloose. Of course there were anti-dancing laws. New York passed a cabaret law banning dancing in businesses without cabaret licenses, which was ratified in 1926. It wasn't repealed until 2017. And it wasn't the only dancing law. In the town of Elmore City, Oklahoma, a ban on public dancing was enacted in 1898. Like in the plot of Footloose, this ban was intended to prevent the immorality that religious leaders believed could result from dancing, including drinking and premarital sex and fun. Without Kevin Bacon there to save the day, the town's ban remained intact for nearly 100 years until Elmore City High School students rallied against it in 1980. The students sought to overturn the ban in order to have a senior prom. There were objectors like Reverend F.R. Johnson who said, "No good has ever come from a dance. If you have a dance, somebody will crash it and they'll be looking for only two things, women and booze. When boys and girls hold each other, they get sexually aroused. You can believe what you want, but one thing leads to another." In spite of his comments, the students got their way, and the ban was officially overturned. Now, hopefully you're a little bit more prepared for your travels through time, or maybe you've decided time travel isn't for you after all. If that's the case, then at least you know a lot of law-based trivia that you didn't know before. Either way, your chances of winding up in a medieval prison or being put to death in ancient Rome are significantly smaller than they were before, and you have no way of proving otherwise. Now check out even more illegal things you didn't know you do every day, or watch this video instead.